But today we're going to be talking a little bit about accountability. And to do that, we're first going to go over to you, Sarah.
All right, so I know the majority of you have been on these webinars. You know how this works. If you are brand new to the audience, we like to use the Mentimeter to get to know you all a little bit. So I'm going to ask you to grab your smartphone. That's the easiest way to do it. Or open a new browser on your computer. Go to menti.com and use the code 795250. And if you haven't had a chance to put in the first album, tape, or CD that you purchased, mine was Aerosmith, Get a Grip. So there you go. There's some news that you can use. I appreciate that we have multiple people who purchased Kansas Song for America, and you all do not disappoint. I also like the person who put in Crisscross, I think. I don't know.
I was thinking, was that their album? I think, but perhaps. I like LL Cool J. We're going to work some LL Cool J into the next webinar.
I'm not sure how he hasn't made our playlist yet. So that's just a miss on our part, a complete miss. The second question that we have for you is, this is a webinar on care and accountability. So what is a word that you associate with accountability? And we see these quickly coming in. We see responsibility. Those are often used interchangeably. Ownership, that you actually associate care with accountability. Appreciate that. Time, action, goals, maturity, myself. Appreciate that. When you ask people what's the thing or person that holds you accountable, you hear oftentimes family members, friends, but also perhaps it's just our own self-accountability.
And just a quick reminder, if you have issues getting into Menti, just put it in the chat room. Jamie will throw it in there into Menti for you.
Okay. We're also seeing measurability, results, reliability, all coming in. Second question for you all. People are 65% more likely to meet a goal after committing to another person. This percentage increases to what if ongoing meetings occur? So we know that if we commit our goal, and so you can think about this like going to the gym. If I commit to a gym buddy, I'm 65% more likely actually to show up at the gym. What percentage does that increase to if I actually schedule ongoing meetings with that same person? Is it 72.678%? I like the person who was like, I bet that's it because it has decimal places. 80%, 90%, or 95%. And as we reveal the correct answer, typically you guys always win these, but in this case, 95%. So if I commit to another person and then I schedule ongoing meetings with that person, my likelihood of meeting that goal increases to 95%. All right, next question for you all. What percent of employees feel that accountability is one of the most important things they'd like to see in their workplace? So team members surveyed, 91%, 71%, 51%, and you know, we've been in quarantine for a while, so I don't know, but it's a lot. It's a fair choice, it's a fair answer. So as we show these coming in, you guys got this one. It is 91%, and also I don't know, but it's a lot. So we're going to give you credit for either one of those answers. Perfectly fine. So we have a lot of content, a lot of tools, a lot of resources for you all on this topic of care and accountability. But in case you just want the shortcut, the easy fix, we thought we'd give you a solution up front. And if this one works for you, then you can just tap out and not listen to the rest of the webinar. So here's one option when it comes to
When we asked Reebok to send us Terry Tate, some people thought we were crazy. But I'm a firm believer in paradigm breaking, outside the box thinking.
Hey, bud.
Break was over 15 minutes ago, Mitch!
And since Terry's been with us, our productivity has gone up 46%. We're getting more from our employees than ever before.
You know you need a cover sheet on your TPS reports, Richard! That ain't new, baby!
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Janice!
But what's really impressed me is how Terry's become part of the Felcher family.
Yeah, baby!
He fits right in here.
That's a long distance call, Doug!
To be honest, I wish Reebok sent us 10 Terry Tates.
You wanna play games, Gene? Well, when it's game time, it's pain time, baby! Woo!
All right, if you have not seen that before, there's a longer version. You can go out, Google it. But in case you don't have a Terry Tate, we're going to give you some other options when it comes to care and accountability. Oftentimes, the question is phrased this way: How do I balance care and accountability? As if I could just care a little bit for you. I could hold you, quote unquote, accountable a little bit. I'm going to care a little. I'm going to hold you accountable a little. And if I get it just correct, it's like a balanced situation. It's like a teeter-totter. The challenge with the premise of that question is that balance implies equal and opposite pressure, that these two are things that are forcing against each other. And we think about them in terms of one's ability to fuel the other. We also know that care does not equal being nice, and accountability does not equal compliance. But oftentimes those things are interchanged. And so what accountability is versus what it is not. Accountability is investing in the growth of others, empowering regular and honest feedback. It's about coaching and mentoring. It generates trust, and it's giving feedback to be better. A lot of the words that you all put into the initial word cloud. Accountability is not, just to be very clear, focusing on mistakes, controlling or micromanaging others, punishment for doing wrong, finding who to blame, or avoiding calling out limiting behavior. So that's kind of the Terry Tate option. Care is certainly giving people what they need. It's listening, but it's also making the really difficult decisions. It's having the tough conversations, perhaps giving the difficult feedback that's tough to say out loud. And it is absolutely building a sustainable business, which requires tough choices. Care is not just giving people what they want, providing all the answers, always creating the easy way out, sugarcoating the truth, or just giving people perks. The equivalent in parenting would be just because I care for my children, that is the reason I give you broccoli. And the reason I don't necessarily just let you do what you want, which would be eating your leftover Easter candy, which is still hiding out in my closet. So what accountability is and what accountability is not. We also know that I can't actually motivate another person. I literally can't hold somebody accountable. Not sure why we use that phrase as if I could manipulate a situation and hold somebody's feet to the fire. I can, however, create the environment in which they choose to motivate themselves. So the balance of the webinar is how do I craft that environment in which people, quote unquote, hold themselves accountable to the work that needs to be done.
Yeah, and to describe this environment, we're going to show you a couple little constructs here. So if I was thinking about rewards on one side, in other words, fix this problem and you get a bonus. These aren't bad, just this is how it is. If I'm thinking about a character that exemplifies this, it would be the Tooth Fairy. Lose a body part, get cash. That's the business proposition of the Tooth Fairy. I don't know why it stops at teeth. That's just where it is. On the opposite end of the spectrum, I have consequences. If you don't fix this problem, you get fired. I'm thinking of the character for that. It's Mr. Free Throat Hugs. That's Darth Vader. In between these two is the environment we are going to talk about, more of intrinsic motivation. I literally want people to fix the problem themselves. If I were thinking of the character for this one, it would be Iron Man. Now, important to note that rewards and consequences, these aren't bad. Most organizations use these, or the bumpers, if you will. On the plus side of rewards, people feel valued. I get a bonus. I contribute to the overall performance of the business. Overused, I start to feel entitled. On the good side of consequences, I get control. And so if you're thinking about when lives on the line, military operations, front line of our healthcare workers, I do need to have some consequences to have that control. That's the good side. If overused, then it starts to become more fear. We're going to talk again in this middle part, this work of leadership, the environment of intrinsic motivation. I'm going to show you a quick video, and this is on because if we don't do this right, we get into fairness monitoring. Are we holding someone accountable? Are we not? So I'm going to show you a very, very quick video on fairness.
So a final experiment that I want to mention to you is our fairness study. And so this became a very famous study, and there's now many more because after we did this about 10 years ago, it became very well known. And we did that originally with capuchin monkeys, and I'm going to show you the first experiment that we did. It has now been done with dogs, and with birds, and with chimpanzees. But with Sarah Brosnan, we started out with capuchin monkeys. So what we did is we put two capuchin monkeys side by side. Again, these animals, they live in a group. They know each other. We take them out of the group, put them in a test chamber. And there's a very simple task that they need to do. And if you give both of them cucumber for the task, the two monkeys side by side, they're perfectly willing to do this 25 times in a row. So cucumber, even though it's really only water in my opinion, but cucumber is perfectly fine for them. Now if you give the partner grapes, the food preferences of my capuchin monkeys correspond exactly with the prices in the supermarket. And so if you give them grapes, that's a far better food, then you create inequity between them. So that's the experiment we did. Recently, we videotaped it with new monkeys who had never done the task, thinking that maybe they would have a stronger reaction, and that turned out to be right. The one on the left is the monkey who gets cucumber. The one on the right is the one who gets grapes. The one who gets cucumber, note that the first piece of cucumber is perfectly fine. The first piece she eats. Then she sees the other one getting grape, and you will see what happens. So she gives a rock to us, that's the task. And we give her a piece of cucumber and she eats it. The other one needs to give a rock to us. And that's what she does. And she gets a grape. And she eats it. The other one sees that. She gives a rock to us now, gets again cucumber. She tests the rock now against the wall. She needs to give it to us. And she gets cucumber again. So this is basically the Wall Street protest that you see here.
All right, so this is how I get out of fairness monitoring, is by creating a little bit better environment, this environment of inspiration. The reason we harp on this inspiration, Duff Simon did some really good work on this and found that inspiration being 27% more predictive of performance than engagement. Engagement will tell us who is doing the work. Inspiration tells us who wants to do the work. Are they authentically dedicated, deeply accountable, fully responsible? So that's the work we're going to be doing. To do that, we're going to talk about 6 key areas: purpose, personal engagement, systems, feedback, capability, and lastly, measurement. These 6 areas, and we're going to discuss each one, and then we're going to allow you to rate and show you, when we work with organizations, what we actually find in each one of these areas. Diving into purpose first. And just starting off, so I've mentioned sometimes when we've talked about our parent company, Barry-Wehmiller. So Barry-Wehmiller is a capital goods manufacturing company. We make machines that make all the things you might consume in a grocery store. And so we had a very interesting question, and that is, I'm not sure our product, the machines that we make themselves, is necessarily inspirational. And so our purpose that we stand by is we measure success by the way we touch the lives of people. This allows us to think a little bit differently, and our programs show up a little differently as well. Because if we're measuring success by the way we touch the lives of people, safety is not about a goal to reduce lost time accidents. That's a budgetary kind of exercise. And I know that we measure, it's the results of it. But the true goal of safety is to send our friends home safe to their loved ones. This mental mindset and the purpose has really impacted a lot of the decisions we've been making as we get into COVID. Let me give it to you in a little bit more abstract one. So when Sir Ernest Shackleton was looking for people to explore into the South Pole there, he said men wanted for hazardous journey, small wages, bitter cold, long months of complete darkness, constant danger, safe return doubtful. In other words, you might die, honor and recognition in case of success. What isn't commonly said was his interview, when they asked him afterwards, he said, "It would seem all the men of Great Britain were determined to join me on this expedition. Such was the outpouring of support." It wasn't that it wasn't danger, it was safe, it wasn't about the pay, it was about this is exploring something, this is dangerous, but a really, really strong sense of purpose, driving why do people want to do that. And so the first one is purpose. And the second one's going to go into is going to be personal engagement. Sarah's going to talk about that.
All right, so the first step is, do I know why I'm doing the work that I'm doing? The second step is, am I involved in the how? And so the analogy we would give you for this one is this idea of climbing a mountain, climbing Mount Everest. But if I'm planning the route and I'm planning the how we're going to get there, what are the individual elements of choice that I have? Perhaps it's I get input into the route. We have route A, route B, and I have a voice in which one we're going to take. Perhaps it's which of the pit stops we're going to camp out in. Perhaps it's just simply what snacks or food I get to bring along the way, but there is some element of choice. And so kind of the parallel here to the business world is even if I'm in a very structured job, and so sometimes we will use the parallel to perhaps like an airline mechanic. I'm not interested in creative ways to take care of that aircraft, and that's not what we're suggesting. But we are suggesting, can somebody choose the order in which they do the work? Is there any flexibility in the timing, or perhaps who's assigned to which piece of the work? Is there any element of choice that I can have in my role? To give you a musical parallel to this, and since we're on the topic of mountains, we will refer to the song Ain't No Mountain High Enough. And what's interesting about this is when Marvin Gaye and Tammy Terrell actually recorded this song, Terrell was so nervous that the vocals were actually recorded separately. So her personal choice, I actually need to do it this way in order to have my best performance. And then they combined their vocals at a later date in the recording studio or in the recording booth. And it's actually regarded as one of the most important records ever recorded or released by Motown. So a musical example for you. A Barry Waymiller example, Matt mentioned our parent company. In our business, we make the things that you see in the grocery store. And a component of putting those machines together is the ability to cut metal parts. And so in order to do this, we have to have a laser. So this is a picture of a laser. It's a big piece of capital equipment. Our plant in Phillips, Wisconsin employs about 500 people in a town of 1,500. And they had an occasion in which they had to purchase a new laser. And so typically we all know these big capital expenditures, that's a senior leadership decision. It's a procurement group that perhaps might source the individual piece that we're going to look at. And instead, what we chose to do was actually have the machine shop, the people that work on this machine, decide, one, how they were going to source the piece of equipment, and also what the final decision would be. And so Lance Johnson was our machine shop team leader. And this is a quote from him. I've bought a house in my life, I've bought vehicles, but I'd never had the chance to buy capital equipment. I started doing homework on what's good about second-hand market. Similar to buying a car, why pay for the brand new piece when they could source a secondhand piece? And when they showed up to the wholesaler, we received feedback that said, I've never seen a group of individuals crawl all over a machine more in my life. So they brought wrenches and screwdrivers and basically took the machine apart, put it back together, and said, absolutely, we trust this. And then Lance commented additionally that the feeling of actually carrying the check, the trust that was placed in him, and in such a small community, this really is directly tied to their personal livelihoods. We do a lot of benchmarking tours. We bring a lot of people up to our Phillips plant location. One of those visitors happened to be Amy Cuddy. She's got a TED Talk out there that's really popular. She's a professor at Harvard. And so she's standing with Lance, and she's hearing this story firsthand. And her comment was, we don't even allow our professors to pick out their own computers. So personal choice. Where am I allowing people to make some decisions on?
Areas there is in systems. So I have the tools I need. As consultants, whether it was my military career or the last 5 or 6 years, and I work with organizations, one of our favorite questions is, what is the greatest system frustration you have in your job? When I highlight that, if I can eliminate that human aspect of it, yes, I'll make it more efficient. Yes, we'll reduce waste, all of those things, but I want the humanistic side of it. What's the greatest system frustration? You've been with us on some of these tracks. You realize we love this control, influence, can't control tool. It allows us to mentally separate out problems into what can I literally control, probably a small amount. What can I is completely outside of my control, probably also a very small amount, like the weather or the economy. Much bigger side, or the much bigger ring, is the influence side. So what can I absolutely influence? I know I showed you a picture of luggage. So the example I usually give, or what's a really good example of a frustrating system, is the lost luggage counter at an airport. Like the lost luggage counter, when you think about the person that works in that area, they're the face of failure for the entire organization. And everyone that comes up to them, they don't say, hey, the airline lost my luggage. They say, you lost my luggage. If you're married to this person, you're in a relationship with this person, you don't ask them how their day was when they come home. You know how it was. It sucked because they don't have any recourse. There's no system to when they knew when their flights were coming in. And so they would go out and not just sit behind the computer, they'd go out and mill around the turnstiles. And as the luggage was coming out, they would be talking to the people that just flew on their airline, chatting with them. Is it your first time here in London? Are you here for business? The usual stuff. Then after a while, all the luggage is gone. And if there's anybody left, those are called their customers. They've already started to talk with them. So then they say, it appears as though your luggage is delayed. Can I take you back to my computer so that we can get it delivered to wherever you're going? It's not that they solved a lost luggage, but they worked right into what I just mentioned, this influence side. They couldn't solve lost luggage because, in truth, a lot of the background of those, the airline doesn't even handle the luggage at some international airports. It's done by other folks. So what they were doing, though, is they were influencing that system. Really, really great question to ask people, and systems is one that routinely is an overlooked area for accountability. Does the job actually support me getting the work done? Another good musical side for this from the influence side is how Beyonce released her album in December 2018 on Thursday evening, I think like almost midnight. She just released her album via Instagram. No promotion, no money, all that kind of stuff. And basically they were upset. She was a little frustrated with how other people could sell the leak and leak the album a little bit early. And so she just decided, I'm just going to influence this and take control of it. In just 24 hours, she sold 430,000 copies, all because of Instagram, Facebook followers. So a good example of influencing the system. The next one is feedback, and Sarah's going to take over on that one.
All right, so if I am connecting my actions to my purpose, I get to have some personal choice. I have the tools, resources, and the system is not frustrating. I also need regular development and feedback. And so we're going to give you just a very short piece on how you structure good feedback. When we ask people in groups, what's the goal of giving feedback? We'll get all kinds of answers, but ultimately the answers funnel down into this one idea that I actually want change to happen. There's not a lot of us who give feedback and go, I don't really care what happens, but we actually want something to be different. Now, perhaps I want you to do more of what you're already doing. Perhaps I want you to be better, or perhaps I'm asking for something to be really, really different. But ultimately, I need to create the environment in which the feedback can be received. We know that really, really good feedback lives at the intersection of I care for you personally, and I'm willing to challenge you directly. So this is based on the work of Kim Scott and Radical Candor, which is a great book. And we've tweaked the language somewhat, and we really look at this like a heat map. That there aren't these like hard lines between the areas, but we understand that if I just lean in the care side a little too much, that's kind of the sugar coating. I'm going to wander around the truth. I'm going to be a little vague. I'm going to hope that you get it. Perhaps if I don't care and I'm not willing to challenge you directly, I just say nothing. And then for sometimes I actually really don't care about you at all, and I'm just going to be really, really aggressive with it. But if I want to create the environment where change can happen, I want to deliver essentially truth with care. I care about you personally, and I'm willing to challenge you directly. So the mindset piece comes first. And then there's 3 elements to ensure that the feedback can be received. One is I have to ask for feedback first. I need to deliver it in a formula that works, and I need to have the ratio correct. So the first one, we know that if you put somebody in under MRI, and we actually ask for your opinion, for your feedback, for your input into something, the same neural activity shows up as if we were giving you a reward, a present, or a gift. And so the easy way to think about this is if somebody comes into your workspace and they say to you, I have some feedback for you. Typically, we're very defensive, like, okay, well, when you're done, I perhaps have some feedback for you. If somebody walks into your workspace and says, hey, I'm so curious. I'd love your feedback on this. We tend to associate positive emotions with this. So if I want to earn the right to give feedback, I have to ask for feedback first. Then I need to deliver it in a formula that works. I need to highlight, here's the situation, here's the behavior, and here's the impact. And so oftentimes we're really general with feedback, and you say, well, do I do that all the time? I need to know the situation in which this feedback occurs. I need to say the exact behavior, and I need to stay free of judgments. And so rather than saying, hey, I think you're really lazy, which is a judgment, I'm going to specifically say on Monday mornings when you show up late to the meeting, very specific situation, very specific behavior. And then I really need to get into the impact, because perhaps the first part's just my opinion, but I need to get into when you show up late, we miss out on your thoughts and ideas. When you show up late, we have to repeat agenda items. I need to let you know, what does this behavior cause to have happen for other people? And when I deliver it in this way, it's much more likely to be received.
Sir, was that feedback for me about being late to meetings?
It is a little bit.
What we're doing right now, right here in the,
it
right
is.
Here in the webinar?
It was a little vague, and I was hoping you'd get it. So it's a sugarcoat situation.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Yeah. The third thing is I've got to be mindful of the ratio. And interestingly enough, I was on a coaching call just yesterday on this exact same topic. And this leader had been giving some pretty tough feedback. And the person in her span of care said, this is great, but you know what? I never hear what I'm doing correctly. And so her reflection was, yeah, you're right. I need to give you the affirmative part. And there's a lot of ratios out there. We picked this one. Typically, you want 5 affirmative messages to every 1 developmental. And this isn't all at the same time. But if you look at perhaps like a month time frame, this is the general ratio that I want to be hitting. I'm constantly calling out that good behavior that I want to see more of. And then when there is a developmental opportunity, I can give you that feedback as well. So those are the 3 steps to delivering great feedback. After I deliver it, I have to fall into listening mode. Perhaps that person has some things that they need to say. I'm going to coach. I'm going to use open-ended questions. I'm going to provide time or space. If you were on our last webinar, perhaps they're a little bit in the box and I need to allow them time to process. I can ask for their feedback. And as they start talking, I at least have to reserve a portion of my mindset that says, perhaps I'm wrong. I gave you the feedback and they say, hold on, XYZ, here's my logical argument back. And perhaps I have to reverse and say, you're right, actually this one's on me. So the steps post are equally as important.
All right, so we're working through this, the purpose. I know why, I know the purpose, I know the context of this. I'm involved in how it happens. I have the tools I need. I get regular developmental feedback. Now I'm talking about capability. I'm trained, I'm coached. So when we think about some of our jobs, we have some very discrete, very functional training. So as an example, my father used to be a pilot for American Airlines, and we also work with them. So this is a simulator trainer. So if you're a pilot for one of the major airlines, you get to be in this simulator. It's very, very clear that you have a very strict training regime that you have to go through. Every year, my father would have all the flight manuals on the kitchen table, be studying for his annual simulator rider check. When I was in the military, same thing. Any kind of system that we were operating, we had simulators that allowed very clear, discrete training. The problem is in some of these, our training isn't as clear. Let me just show you, for speaking of flying, we're going to bring this back to the musical rendition again. Learning to Fly was released in 1991 by Tom Petty, huge hit for him. The entire song is based in 4 simple chords, F, C, A minor, and G. And did you know that the flight is 4 simple forces? Weight, lift, thrust, and drag. Coincidence? I think not.
I was really proud when he discovered that one.
Do you know how hard the little synapsy things had to happen for that, people? And you don't even, do you even appreciate this? This is incredible stuff. I thought we had a relationship. I thought we were going to move in together and get a cat or an aquarium fish. And now it's just only the power to entertain. All right. Training, capability. Let's get back into this. Where are we? Some jobs, very clear. Some other jobs might be a little more, let's call them amorphous, right? Maybe I don't get absolute training. So one of the jobs that I had was I ran a small think tank for a commanding general of a huge arm of the U.S. Air Force. We did everything from speech writing, congressional testimony, leadership development, those type of things. I got to handpick the people that were there, and so we hired really, really smart people. And this one person I hired, great pedigree, great record, really incredible education. So I was doing the speech writing function, and I let him, and I said, your turn to be the speechwriter. And we had a lot of issues in the group, and there was a lot of negative attitude that he had, and I'm making all these judgments. And so finally I've had enough, and I just called him in the office, and this is where right? If you think the military works in this accountability thing, like you can be the big, strong person and you have a whole bunch of rank and power. And so I call them in and I just start, the conversation goes something like this. I'm going to say a few things. Your answer to everything I say is 2 words and 2 words only, and that's yes, sir. And so then I just start lighting into him. Oh, it felt so good. You're going to stop having an attitude. You're going to turn your stuff in on time. And he's just repeating back, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir. So about 5 minutes until, you know, I've gotten it all out of my system. Now I feel pretty good. I'm like, what do you have to say for yourself? Something like that, really servant leadership there. And he says, I think this one just got away from us. I want you to know it is so incredibly daunting that every morning I come in and I look at a white blank piece of paper, and then knowing that what I write is going to be on CNN by the end of the day. What happened, and Sarah mentioned this about the feedback, reserve the right that you can be wrong. What happened was I never gave him any of the training. I just figured, you're a smart guy. I went to really important universities that I could not have even probably spelled correctly. And I expected him to be able to do the work. It's not fair on him. So when we think about the accountability, I can certainly, quote unquote, hold the person accountable. I can bring in consequences. I might even be able to layer in a bunch of incentives. That job that we had that I pulled him into was guaranteed making the next rank. You only brought in the very best of people. But if I'm not going to give you the capability, I can't hold you accountable. Where I take this is not a self-serving kind of thing, but I will offer when we work with organizations, and research will say about only 50% of people when they're promoted into a leadership role get any type of training on being a leader. Fundamentally, a portion of their job has significantly changed, and we just expect because you were a really good doer, you should now be the king or queen of the doers. And so when it comes to accountability, about do I give you the right resources? When we do consulting around the world, we have our own survey that we use in organizations. We also do focus groups. The number one complaint, and you would think a lot of times it would be pay or it would be benefits or something like that. The number one complaint that we get in focus groups are, I don't have the tools, the resources or skills I need to do my job. I know I'm putting this back on us, but before we're talking about how do I just hold someone accountable, I got to build the environment that allows them to at least do the job. The last one here, so we just talked about capability. I'm trained, I'm coached. The last one is measuring. I know what winning looks like. So the equivalency is if I don't know what winnings look like, can you imagine like playing a game without knowing the score? Are there any roles in your organization where this might be happening? For ours, it might be something like accounts receivable, where what's the amount of work? Like, how do I know that I'm literally actually winning at my job? And so it's really challenging. And the reason why I want to know what winning is once I know what winning is, now I can start measuring progress. Progress driven for us, this is dopamine, one of the chemicals in our mind. It keeps us moving toward. It's really important that we set mile markers or project milestones to show that we're literally making progress toward the goal line. It allows me to be literally inside. The human body runs on this kind of motivation, but I need to see that there's some incremental progress. If I were using the analogy here, it would be mile markers. So I've ran a few marathons, and Mateo, you don't need mile markers. You need to run 26.2 miles, right? All you do, the gun goes off, follow people in front of you, run until you're really tired and you feel terrible and you second guess your entire existence, then run 6.2 more and you're done. I don't need the mile markers. The reason I put them in there, though, is because now I know, oh, I'm making progress. I'm on mile 3. Oh, mile 4, now I've got water. Now I'm in mile 6. Really, really critical in our organizations, defining what winning looks like, ability to put markers to show progress. That way, inside of me, I start to be motivated. And speaking of running, let's talk about the 80s. A flock of seagulls. First of all, when you look at this picture, you have to realize, too, there were probably other photos they took. This is the best one that they got.
I feel like the guy on the left is like their dad that just like wandered in. The craziness.
Yeah. And the white belt, which we're not going to talk about, but the white belt's coming back, folks. I'm bringing back the white belt. The guy on the left does not look like me. That's just me. Now we're definitely not moving in and getting a cat together. Okay, the song I Ran. Huge, popular one-hit wonder. But according to the band, the song is about a man who sees a woman, attempts to run away from his feelings, but before this happens, they're abducted by aliens. People, this is all free. These are nuggets of gems. We didn't even know this. You should be teaching your children this. All right, so really important that we put some mile markers in, speaking of running. When we do this, we're looking at 3 areas for our organizational culture assessment. we look at both the people. Yes, I want to know about how you're behaving to one another. I definitely want to know about how people align to the organization's goals. Really critical, and the whole reason we even built our own assessment was I want to know about how the work is aligned. Do you have the training, the tools, the resource, you have the capability? What's that system and what is that structure? So as we wrap this up, I'm going to ask Sarah, we're going to go back into Menti. We're going to have you rate your own. Sarah?
All right, so we're going to pull you back into menti.com. Hopefully your browser is still up. It is the same exact code. And what I'm going to ask you to do is for you, rate these factors. So for you, you know why you do the work you do, the purpose of the organization, and you can link the purpose of the organization to your job, to your individual tasks. You are involved in the how. You have personal choice in your role. Systems, you have the tools that you need. You do not find your work frustrating. Feedback, I get regular development, both that kind of the affirmative feedback as well as the development feedback. Capability, I feel like I'm fully trained and coached in the role that I have. And measurement, I know what winning looks like. So as we see these come in, which are pretty interesting, we've got a good number of people who say, I have a good sense of why I'm doing the work. I can connect my role to purpose. I have a good degree of being involved in the how. I have the tools that I need. My system is not frustrating. Less on I'm getting the regular feedback and less on I've been given specific training and coaching for this role. And then a slightly more on I know what winning looks like. So as Matt kind of rolls over, you can see what those scores are. And the faded color in the background is the standard deviation. So you can see kind of the agreement that's happening in this group. And so this is an interesting exercise, one from a self-reflection standpoint. Do you personally kind of exist in an environment of accountability? But it's also one way to open this conversation up with your team, the people that are in your span of care. And so what we wanted to do is share with you, we do run this with organizations. And typically when we do, we will have people rate, and oftentimes it is the senior leader team, and we'll say, okay, rate this for yourself, and then rate this for the people in your direct span of care. So typically middle management, and then rate this for the front line. And there are consistently themes that come out to the point that we can typically call exactly how the measurements are going to come out each and every time. More often than not, senior leadership teams will rate highest in all categories except for I receive feedback. So I'm doing good across the board, but I don't actually receive that affirmative or developmental feedback. The front line will tend to rate lowest in all categories except measurement. And so if I directly pit two of these against each other, I don't necessarily, in the front line, I don't have an ability to connect my day-to-day role to the purpose of the organization, or that has not been made clear to me how I advance the purpose of this organization. And yet, I am being measured. I have all of those KPIs and all of those stats. That part I'm very, very clear on. Middle management tends to rate the highest in getting feedback. And so my other scores overall are a little bit lower. However, senior leadership is giving me a lot of feedback. And typically, if you took that one layer deeper, probably in a disproportionate ratio. So I'm getting a lot of development feedback, but not necessarily that affirmative feedback. And so this is tremendously consistent across most of our clients, most organizations, irregardless of location in the world, irregardless of industry. This tends to happen whenever we run this. And so it's interesting as you all reflect, and we don't know the role that everybody's playing who happens to be listening into this webinar, but your results tended to mirror a little bit. People who tend to be on these webinars probably have some kind of a leadership role in the organization.
Yeah, Sarah, I just mentioned really quickly here, this is your ratings. The other thing to think about, and I'm sorry if I missed this, but when we define frontline, we're asking people who is closest to your customers. Like who's the representative, basically the ambassador of your organization, that's frontline. So the people that I'm trying to hold accountable the most are rate the lowest consistently in all of these areas, except I'm gonna measure the heck out of you. And so if I want better customer service and I want people to lean in, this is what we see. And by the way, we'll provide you some resources so that you can have your own team rate these slides, all that kind of stuff. We'll provide them to you.
All right, we'll also give you action items in each of these 6. So you say, okay, great. What are some things that I can do to perhaps increase those rating scores for my frontline, for my middle management, or perhaps for myself? So this is what we brought you through. We have our tooth fairy, our rewards that is an option. And as Matt mentioned, this isn't necessarily bad. I can make people really feel valued if I do this in an appropriate way that doesn't trigger that fairness monitoring. There are consequences. And we would never say that these are bad either. There are certain things that require a consequence to happen. However, rewards and consequences are not your strongest element that you can use to increase this idea of an environment of accountability. What is your strongest tool in your toolbox is the 6 that we just brought you through. And so am I willing to put effort and energy into all 6 of those factors so that, in fact, I get a bunch of Ironmans in my organization, people who want to fix the problem. So speaking of Ironman, that's the best transition that I have. Matt told me ahead of this, this is just like we're going behind the scenes in this one. He said, don't screw this slide up. Because you might be able to tell Black Sabbath, not my genre of music necessarily. Are you shocked? Matt's saying he's shocked. All right, so Black Sabbath, when they wrote the song Iron Man, Ozzy Osbourne remarked, he heard the initial riff, the initial chords, and he remarked to the band, well, this sounds like a big iron bloke walking about. The title became Iron Man. And in order to get the effect, and we are going to play this song for you at the conclusion of the webinar, in order to get that effect in his sound, in his voice, he actually stood behind a metal fan. And then the rest is in the movies that we have all seen, and of course in the playlist for this webinar. How'd I do?
Well done.
All right. We'd be remiss if we didn't comment on, okay, a lot of us, not all of us, but a lot of us are operating in a virtual environment. And so how do I do some of these things considering I'm not necessarily physically with the team that I'm leading? And so some enablers for care, flexibility and working arrangements, being really cognizant that everybody's family interaction is different, allowing opportunities for personal growth. It's the reason why we're offering this webinar series, is to say we can still pour some love and attention into people during this time, and always connecting the decisions that we're making to our values. So regardless of if it's good news or bad news, care is having the tougher conversations. I'm going to start by leaning in to the values, and I'm going to ask people in my span of care this question: what can I do to support you more in this time? From an accountability standpoint, if we can go back one more. From an accountability standpoint, I'm going to make sure that the team understands what part of our strategy are we focusing on right now? How am I giving some engagement opportunities? How am I getting the input of my team? I'm, of course, structuring the work so that we actually are getting the job done. And you see living our values in both columns, because it's both care and accountability. And asking the team, hey, during this time, what do you think we could do more, better, different, is a great way to have that conversation. From a blocking standpoint, care, I'm only going to talk about KPIs. I'm never going to turn on my video, and I'm just going to basically leave you alone. Like, why do we have to have the check-ins? We're not in the same place. Versus accountability blockers, if I just kind of leave this to chance and say, hey, you know what, we'll tap back into our strategic areas of focus when we get back, or I don't narrow down the focus, it's really tough to create that environment of accountability. If I'm not linking to the purpose, or perhaps I'm not aware of the resources that people need, or at least not asking that question, what do you need to be successful from home? So some virtual enablers and some virtual blockers. And then finally, we promised you some action items. So not going to go through all of these line item by line item. You will get this in the slide deck when you get your email with all of the great recordings, but things that you can do. So here are the key drivers. Here's what they look like. So you can use this as kind of a checklist. If I'm trying to kind of decide, does this exist or not exist in my team or organization? And then action items that you can do to increase scores for the people in your span of care.
Hey, Sarah, as people are reading this real quick, can we just hold on this slide, answer a couple of questions? One of them that came in was about, have you done this in either the hospitality or, the service industry and healthcare in particular? We have. So especially in the service industry, hospitality, the bars that we showed you, especially between frontline and the senior team, or even more, the gap is even greater, especially for that frontline, because we think about, okay, well, your job is just to do the service. I've structured it, just go get it done. Very little opportunity in these areas. And for most organizations, it really is a wake-up call. It's not our most inspirational work where everybody leaves happy. They're like, wow, we got some work to do. My gosh.
Yeah, and a specific example, not sure if you were going to go here, but a hotel chain that we got to know really applied this to their housekeeping staff. And so what they realized is it's extremely regimented. You have to clean 36 rooms per day. It has to be done in this particular order, in this particular way. However, the one piece of choice they can give is to say, you have to have the rooms cleaned by this time during the day, but you can still come in whenever you want. And so they ran an experiment in one of their locations. And what they saw was really interesting. At first, the housekeepers started to come in earlier. And so what they realized when they asked them, well, why are you coming in earlier? They're like, well, one, if I get my job done, I can go and do pickup from school. I can make the soccer game, whatever it happens to be. So it benefits me to actually get this done faster. Two, the actual scores, the cleanliness scores actually went up. And when they asked, well, what's driving this? Well, the reason was we don't want to lose this flexibility. So we're doubling down on our effort because we want this to continue. Finally, somebody actually came in late, and actually the leader was so excited and brought everybody together and was actually thrilled. This person was like, hey, I'm coming in at 10 a.m. and I'm still going to get my job done by the allotted time. And when they asked for why, she said, well, I've worked for you for 10 years, and this is the first opportunity that I had to go to church with my family. And so both impact, so in a very regimented industry, can I at least give you one little choice that you can make?
Yeah, and interesting that the quality went up. And when they asked them, why would it go up? They're like, well, we don't want you to take this away from us. So we're working even harder to keep the personal choice. A couple of other questions. When you teach leaders, how do you help intrinsic motivation to quote unquote dawn on them if they're resistant to it? And so we have under contract Terry Tate. He's expensive, but he's worth it. Now, one of the ways that we work with leaders is we tend to stay out of completely conceptual land. So when we talk about accountability or holding people accountable, it's a concept, it's an idea. Intrinsic motivation, it's a concept, it's an idea. I'm going to get down into the behaviors and lead people through something like this so they can see, oh, you're right. How can I hold this person to get that job done if I literally haven't given them the training? Oh, you're right. They have no idea what the context is, but I'm much closer to it. We're going to get very tactical, very behavioral aspects of it, show some case studies, and then as we're working with them, allow those people literally to use their own intrinsic motivation as they see it happening in others. So one way is we stay out of the concept land and bring in the behaviors. Another question was about how do you do this if it hasn't been done before? Like, let's say we're not a culture of accountability, let's say, and then how do I introduce this where it doesn't seem like it's a bunch of finger pointing, a bunch of policing around? One way is I stay out of just saying, everyone, listen up, we're going to increase accountability, right? I don't think anybody's like, that sounds great. What I can get into is to say, having a conversation and asking for feedback. So I'm going right into this content by saying, I'd like some feedback on how the work gets done. One way we can do this is by rating all of these different areas. These are really powerful leadership development and leadership bonding for either senior teams or entire organizations we brought through this construct. One way to get more accountability is instead of talking about it at the higher level, is each one of these discrete areas, breaking it apart. That way I don't have to say, and therefore now we're going to crank up accountability. What I need to do is, before as a leader that I can hold you accountable, I need to be accountable to the environment you're working in. Unless you think that as an ex-military guy that I can just walk in and bark orders at people, I certainly could. It's how I ran my first leadership. I was 19 years old and had 6 people reporting to me. That's all I did. I was angry at them. I told them what had to be done. We worked really hard. They hated me. I hated them back. I thought, this is a disaster. Then they said, you should go to officer training school. And I thought, I'm never going to lead that way again. You can lead that way. It just becomes very frustrating for you. And so if you don't want to walk around with a clipboard everywhere and checking up on people, literally doing this work, it allows me to care more for people. More work gets done. And yes, then people are more accountable to themselves. And so then the people that need help, I come right into one of these 6 areas. I know I've been talking, that was a lot of words. Sarah, anything to add on those 2 questions? I apologize.
Just to comment, a great comment coming in from Tara, that the question that they use is, what's more difficult in your job than it should be? And so if you have to start somewhere, we would urge you to start in the systems. That is probably your greatest lever and the greatest thing, that if I just have people coming in and my job is not designed well, you can get a lot of impact in that area. And we had another question: how can we be sure the purpose of the organization is taken seriously by employees? And this is a good example of a question that if this was a live facilitation, I'd probably say, tell me more about that, what's going on. So just a couple of thoughts. One is that it's not about getting people to memorize or carry around or say, can you quote the values, but really having people engage with the statement from a personal standpoint. And one way to do that is to say, I'm just curious, what's your best day at this organization? What's the day that you drove home thinking I am in the right role at the right time? And they share that story. Their ability, or your ability, to coach them through and say, that's all our purpose is enabling people to have that best day more often. And oftentimes, because people are going to talk about what inspires them, they're going to talk about serving other people, it's easy to connect that to the purpose of the organization. So it's not a rote exercise in, can I drill this purpose down? It is about having conversations where people connect their personal stories to the mission, vision, purpose, values of the organization, and saying, and in accounts payable, if it weren't for you, we couldn't do any of that. Cool, got it. Now I understand that I'm linked to the bigger process or the bigger thought that's going on.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add to that is oftentimes when I hear organizations, when they're wondering about is the purpose, do people lean into it, the org, the first thing I'll ask is, tell me the last time the senior leadership team mentioned it and made a decision aligned with it and communicated that they were making that decision because of that purpose. And then after about 5 seconds of waiting and they're thinking, I say, that's where it starts. And then I don't get invited back. Okay, some feedback. First one is for you all to each other. So I'm going to jump us back into Menti, please. And this is, what have you learned or will do differently as a result of this webinar? This is not feedback to us, but there's so many smart people on this webinar today. I know it takes a little bit of time to put it in your phone, but if you mention what you're going to do specifically in your organization, it helps other people think about that as well. And so as these start to come in, what have you learned? Nothing. Okay, cool. We'll keep moving. I mean, come on. You at least learned about flock of seagulls, I'm sure. I'm sure that my team understands their purpose. Good one. Asking about systems frustration in different roles, best day, system problems. Spelling, yes. Focus on the 5-to-1, people, purpose, and process. Yeah, what their greatest frustration is. Best day, good one for coaching. Yep, let people make a choice. The 5-to-1 ratio, right? Catch people doing things right. Most of us in leadership positions have been promoted into fixing problems, and therefore, what do you look for? You look for things that are going wrong. It's just your disposition. That was mine as well. Like, that's why I'm hired. I fix things. But there's a lot of other work that's going on and getting it right. And so do people understand that I value their efforts, their achievements, and how they're behaving, and catching them doing it right is a great way to do that. I build the trust up that way. When I do need to give more developmental feedback, that care aspect is already cranked up on that. If you don't mind, if you can keep putting these in, I'm going to transition out. We're going to download Mentimeter and provide all of this to you as well. So we'll provide everything you're putting in. So please go ahead and keep putting that into Mentimeter. But we have one other aspect of feedback, and that is directly to us. So if you don't mind, would you please, I'm going to launch this poll right now, and Sarah's going to confirm that it's up. And if you don't mind, there's just 4 really quick questions. It takes about 5 seconds. It'd help us out tremendously if you can give us some feedback on how this went for you. That's really appreciated, and we make improvements on that. And speaking of improvements, we're going to drop 2 bonus tracks as Greatest Hits album. And so you see this quote by Plato here about music. So we've really enjoyed putting these things to a little bit of music. And so our bonus tracks, the first one is going to be more cowbell. The 1 trait you need to keep the band together. It's going to be on emotional intelligence, but very specifically to increase retention rates, to reduce confrontation, and to survive not only COVID, but also what's next. Especially in most organizations, they're going through some kind of change. Emotional intelligence, usually around the 80th percentile of derailers in a career. Not about strategy, not about your thinking or your IQ, but mostly about the emotional intelligence someone brings to the workplace. We're going to do that one. And the last one will be Rock On, how to bring your band back together. I said that really nicely, didn't I? Playbook for reentry, whether it's returning from stay-at-home or returning to the new normal. a.m. Central Daylight Time. We hope you can join us for that. I believe that if anyone is registered for the series, we're going to automatically enroll you in this, and then you can just disenroll yourself if you'd like, but we hope to see you all at those two ones there. And the last one, how we can help. Here's our email. You can feel free to email us, connect with us on LinkedIn. And we do executive coaching. We obviously do these custom webinars, training. We also can do some team effectiveness facilitation. So if you're with us with team effectiveness and accountability, we can marry those up. Coming up next week, we have Q&A with author and CEO Kristen Hadid. She runs Student Made, prolific and outspoken person on social media, really good friend of ours and just a tremendous leader. You'll enjoy that one. I mentioned more cowbell and rock on, and then we are bringing our inclusion class, Rethink Diversity in the Workplace. This is a two-part online course. It's going to be on May 21st and June 4th. The times, I know we didn't write them down here, but the times are 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So that's a two-part online course on inclusion, and we are running that for the really really low price of nothing. So we hope you can join us, and there's no limitation to seats. So you want your entire organization to go through it? Great, we'd love to have you. You want to just check it out for maybe bringing it in later on when you can be in person? That's fine too. So we hope you can join us for those courses as well. But so much appreciate all of you being with us today. And so I'm going to get some music ready to play, and Sarah is going to close us out.
Oh, just a shout out to Brandy Walters, who says cell phone light out for the encore. We appreciate the digital support, and we so appreciate all of you hanging out with us. So we've been thinking about ways that we can thank you all. So we'll have another announcement coming pretty soon from some ideas that we have. So just really appreciate it. Thanks for the comments, the questions, and always the great support as we move through this time.